This is George Williams, and welcome back to our Odyssian Void and Introductory series. For the next several video mini-series, I guess you call them, we're going to be talking about the game mechanics, finally. This is going to be literally the largest section that we're going to talk about of that document I mentioned earlier, that 40-page document. More than half of the pages are about game mechanics. So starting from page 17 to page 40, it's all pretty much game mechanics. So lots to talk about. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the more high-level topics and work down to low-level topics. So let me describe what that means. So in programming, you have high-level programming languages and low-level programming languages. The difference between the two is a high-level language is a language that you don't have to have much. I don't say you don't have to have much knowledge about how it works, but you don't have to have much knowledge about how the program interacts with the computer on a hardware level, or things like that. So, Visual Basic.NET, for example, is an extremely high-level language because it's pretty much plain text syntax, and really don't have to know anything about system hardware or resource management or anything like that. To a point, C# and Java are also high-level languages because they have automated memory management in them, so you don't have to destroy things that you create and stuff like that. On the other hand, you have a low-level language, which is a language that we're going to go low to high on the mechanics, not high to low. A low-level language, on the other hand, is a language that you, if you choose to, because most low-level languages can be used as a high-level language, depending on how you use it, are languages that you can essentially interact directly with the hardware with, like C++. You can get right down to the basic hardware and have to take into a lot more things into account. Like, if you create a new object dynamically in C#, yes, it's the new language coming out. C++. How about C++? But in C++, then you have to destroy it to free up the memory that takes up while the program's running. Obviously, when you shut down the program, it should, if you haven't totally messed things up, release that resource allocation for that. But if you don't release it while the program's still running, then you get a memory leak. And I think pretty much anybody watching this video will have dealt with one at least at one point or another, either through a game or program or something. So, memory leak is just when a program is using up resources continually and up until the point where it crashes because the system can no longer allocate any more resources to it. Generally, though, you only see memory leaks on 32-bit programs, games, or otherwise, because those are predisposed to being affected by memory leaks, since they can only have, I think it's like normally I'd say 2 gigabytes is about the maximum amount of RAM any 32-bit program can use. It could theoretically use up to the full amount, but for some reason I think there's a flag built into the operating system, 32-bit operating systems, that cap it at 2 gigs. On 64-bit systems, it's a little more opaque, or a little more muddy, if you will, I guess. Opaque. I guess opaque could work there. It's not as cut and dry because 64-bit systems have as much memory as the motherboard allows. I think the maximum support for an operating system, 64-bit operating system, is like 64 terabytes or something of RAM, which no system ever created will ever reach, with probably in the next 25, 50 years. Normal system, not supercomputers. Supercomputers are a different story, but for regular systems, yes. So that's what a memory leak is, and that's what happens in a low-level programming language when people don't properly code for dealing with resource management. Higher-level languages do that automatically most of the time, or they should. So that's the difference between those two. So how that connects to the game mechanics we'll be talking about. low-level mechanics are mechanics which will have lots of others built on top of them, whereas high-level mechanics will be the mechanics that will be built on top of the lower mechanics. So, for example, talking about the universe, which is the first thing we're going to go into, that's going to be the lowest level mechanic of them all because everything will be built on top of that. And that's how we're going to go. We're going to go from lowest to highest. Now, that may not always be the case, but that's the general flow I'm going to try and go with. That's how I made the this outline script thing to go. Within the general topics, not overall. So, like, for example, any related system to the universe mechanics will go after the universe mechanics. Talking about, like, the trade, the economic system go first, and trading and so on. So it's not going to be like we're going to go universe, then whatever the next one up is the universe, then systems, then battle, then whatever. It's going to be within its own genre of game mechanics, if you will. So the universe is going to be essentially the it's not really going to be the game space, but it's going to be the place where the game happens. Let's put it that way. Essentially, the universe will be the systems you're able to visit. It'll start out small with a group of core systems, is what they'll be called. These are systems that'll be part of the initial systems that have been explored for the game. I'm going to be trying to do some kind of mixture of procedurally generated and non-procedurally generated systems. So systems that are that contain the home systems of various races will be in a static place and have static names and have static things in them, as opposed to, say, systems that are not that will be completely random every game. So the home systems and anything that connects within one jump to them will be static. Everything else after that will be non-static, unless it bumps up against another home system or one jump from that home system. So there will be static stuff within the game, but most of it will be procedurally generated. Well, it's not really even procedural generation per se. Procedural generation suggests that it's created as you are getting to it. It's more going to be random generation, I guess you could say, based on seeds and whatnot. So more like Nemoria, less like No Man's Sky, where everything is created based off of a seed, and as things are new things are added to the universe, those would then be procedurally generated, I guess you could say. Because the newer things won't be part of the galaxy yet, but the stuff that was existing would be. So the core systems will be static and randomly generated, and then the rest of the systems that will be added on over time will be procedurally generated. So that brings us to the next point. While the universe will start out small, it's going to expand as time goes on, and how fast that expansion will happen will depend on a couple things. The first thing will be one of the seeds. There are going to be multiple seeds that'll be handling all kinds of things. You'll have like a master seed which will deal with the universe as a whole in terms of resource allocations to different systems and that kind of thing. Then you'll have intersystem random generation seeds that'll deal with things like the number of planets, the number of stations, number of asteroid belts, what corporations are based on that, either based in that system or have a office in that system, and that kind of stuff. And it'll be a lot of different seeds that you can mess around with. They'll be able to be edited as through the game creation section, if you will. So it's going to be you will be able to have play the exact same game either as somebody else or that you played before if you want to through the seeds, for the most part. There may be some differences, so. But in terms of where things are placed, so say like you're watching somebody on YouTube doing something in the game, hopefully getting ahead of myself there, but say you're watching somebody do a walkthrough or something and you want to play in the exact same universe that player is playing in, because there may also be a kind of co-op or multiplayer component that I'm that I may decide to make, then you could have that same seed to play on, or they can give you address or something or whatever, however that'll work. Which I'll talk about more later on. So that kind of stuff. So the universe will expand over time based on these seeds, and as new systems are discovered, they will appear on the map, and they will have just kind of some sort of randomly generated name associated with them. And this will be their name for the duration until they become an established system. Now, what determines if they're an established system is the amount of economic throughput, if you will, from the system. Once it reaches a certain level, it will become an established system and get a proper name. Everything will be renamed, the plants and whatnot will be renamed to that system name. And you'll be able to start doing stuff in that system. Like setting up stations or taking over planets or what have you. Up until that point, though, the system is essentially... you could do it before then, before it becomes an established system, but it'd be extremely expensive. Once it's an established system, the costs for colonization or creating a station or what have you drop significantly. I still am in the process of making all the various points about how that's all going to work, but that's essentially what will happen. How much that drop will be is to be determined. TBD. So once you become an established system, you'll be able to do all that kind of stuff with it, and so will other empires, the AI and whatnot, will be able to also do that. And whether or not certain other entities within the game also try to make like a base out of that system depends on a couple things as well. So it's a really kind of complex topic to talk about without also talking about some of the other stuff that we're going to be talking about. So I guess we'll leave it at that, and then you can infer all the stuff that we're going to talk about back to that, and it'll all make sense then. So, as a system is created, a new system is created, it'll have a security rating, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. And the security rating depends on, one, how far it is away from a core system, and two, how... No, yeah, just one. I guess we're just going to go off the core system. That's right. I'd originally planned for two considerations for the security, but that's not. It's going to be based on the core system distance. So the further away it is from a core system, the lower the security rating will be initially, and that has various connotations we'll talk about here in a second. Actually, that's probably a pretty good segue. So let's go ahead and talk about the security rating system. So as the name implies, it is kind of like the EVE Online system. Actually, it is exactly like the EVE Online system. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to be doing for the game is going to be based on, or in some part inspired by a lot of the systems from EVE Online, because that's my go-to example for a awesome 4X game. Mechanics-wise. In terms of community-wise, maybe not, because it's a pretty damn cutthroat game, and you're liable to get blown up within 5 minutes of starting. At least that's what's happened to me and a couple of my friends have played the game. But a lot of the different systems in the game are actually pretty interesting, and this is one of them. So the security rating system is essentially a rating of how secure a system is, or how... I guess a better way to say it is how lawless it is. It also is a gauge of how lucrative the stuff you find, how valuable the stuff you find is in the system, because the more valuable the stuff is in the system, the more likely it is to have pirate activity. So everything is kind of directly proportional. A system with a low security rating is a lot less secure. It's a lot more chance that you could be destroyed, but it's also going to be a lot more lucrative to mine there, for example, or sell items there. Though that part, selling items at that place may or may not be more lucrative. It depends on a couple other things, but the theory holds usually. So what the security rating determines is a bunch of stuff. First of all, for example, determines how many pirates will spawn in that system at any given time. Most of the time, pirates will spawn in asteroid fields, asteroid belts. Sometimes they'll spawn around stations, though, depending on how adventurous they're feeling, and if they're really, just kind of tripping out on balls and whatnot, then you might even see them spawning around the jump gates. But that'll be less likely to happen because the Telerath are usually around jump gates to scan incoming ships for contraband and whatnot. It also affects the strength of the pirates that are being spawned. So, for example, on a 1.0 security system, you may only get, say, low threat ships, and we'll talk about that next. That's the threat system, is what we're talking about after the security rating system. But in a 0.1 security system, you might see some deadly ships, deadly threat ships. Pretty wide, on the spectrum there, but that's just kind of an example. And that'll make sense when we talk about the threat system. The one thing that security rating does not affect is the number or strength of ships that are sent after you by. I shouldn't say it doesn't. It influences it, but not very much. And that is the strength and number of enemy ships that any enemies of yours send after you. So, if you really make an empire or a corporation mad at you, like say negative 80 to negative 100, kind of really pissed off at you, then they'll start sending ships after you, either their own ships or people they've hired to try and bring you in, kill you, whatever, capture you. And these are not affected overall by the security rating. It will infect them a little bit. Like, for example, no matter how mad a corporation is at you, they cannot send a deadly threat ship after you in a 1.0 security system. But they can still send, a whole swarm of lower security, lower threat ships after you. So that's the one place that the security rating does not really apply too much. Another place the security rating will affect is what types of resources and how lucrative drops are in that system. So the lower the security rating, the more valuable the ores you can mine will be, and also the more valuable wreckages will be, salvaging will be. There will also be an increase of various traps and things as well. For example, you might find a wreckage floating out in space, and it may be a trap set up by pirates to lure in unsuspecting ships. Those will be more common in lower security systems as opposed to higher security systems. What determines the security rating of a system is how far it is away from a core system, and also how long that system has been in the game. So, as time goes on, the security rating will increase up to a maximum of 1.0, and the security rating will be soft capped at I think I said 0.4 higher, up 0.4 higher than the initial value, unless it's 1.0, which is the highest. So what I mean by a soft cap is, and pretty much everything in this game is going to be soft cap, not hard cap, because hard caps to me are, they're heretical. I hate hard caps, and I think nobody should use hard caps. But what soft caps are essentially caps that are created not by hard coding some value in that you can't go past. That's a hard cap. A soft cap is creating a situation where to get to the next value or next level or whatever you're monitoring or capping off, the amount of whatever you need to do that gets so great that it's practically impossible to get to that next whatever. So, for example, in this case, let's say that you start with a 0.3 security system, and maybe over the first 6 hours of actual real-time gameplay, it'll go to a 0.4. Then after another 32 hours or so, it'll go to a 0.5. Then after another 80 or so hours, to go to a 0.6. And at 0.6, it will, actually I said 4, so it'll be 0.7. So that would be another 170 hours maybe. 0.7, and at that point, at 0.7, to get from 0.7 to 0.8 would take like to 3,000 hours of gameplay, real-time gameplay or something. That's what a soft cap is. It's a cap where the algorithm you're using to calculate the time it takes for something to increase becomes exponentially more large, to such a point that where it's practically impossible to increase the value. And that's how the premise of the security rating system and a lot of the other things in the game that are kind of limitations will work. Like for the cell, for example, we'll talk about that a lot. Maybe not a little bit later, but a lot later. It is one of the game we can actually be talking about. So it is possible to get every system in the game to 1.0, but you would have to play the game for like 20,000 hours of real actual gameplay time to do it or something. And it may not even actually be possible depending on how many systems I'll have in the databases for the final version of the game, or at least the release version. Because essentially what will happen is that the universe will be able to expand indefinitely, or at least until the database table that holds the system names is exhausted. So you could potentially have, tens of thousands of systems, if not hundreds of thousands of systems within the game. Now, how that would work as far as hardware limitations, I don't know. That's kind of like a whole situation where you have this option to like in Shadows of Mordor, you use 4K textures, but you have to have a system strong enough to use them. And maybe some sort of similar situation where you can choose a soft cap or a hard cap for the number of systems to have, maximum systems to have. And it'll just make some sort of warning that says you have to have this much RAM, or you should have this, this strong of a system, or else you could face, low frame rates or something. Or crashes. Because you've used up all your RAM for the game, and your system says, I'm just going to go to sleep now. So, that's what a soft cap is, and that's how the security rating system will be based on. Over a set amount of time, the rate will increase until it hits that soft cap, and then it will take much longer after that to get to the next rating level. Now, there are ways that you can use this tactically, and it's going to be one of the interesting points in the game in a lot of different cases, because there's a lot of times you can use some of these systems tactically to your advantage, be it in war or in trade or something else like that. Depending on how creative you can get with using and abusing the systems, you can do some pretty interesting stuff. For example, you could use the security rating system and use a way that you can drop the rating value to your advantage in certain circumstances. So how you would do that, or go about doing that, is essentially, one, you have to have either a large fleet with you or a really strong ship. And then you have to find out where the Telerath station is at. So the Telerath are essentially the intergalactic police, if you will. They're essentially Eve's Concord, but for Odyssian Void. Their job is to, as I mentioned in the Galactic Government section, but in case you didn't watch those videos, essentially it's their job to monitor all the traffic through systems, and for wanted criminals, scanning ships for contraband, that kind of stuff. And unlike an EVE Online, though, in this game the Concord will, if you are wanted or you have illegal materials on your ship, they will chase after you and try to capture you. They may even try to destroy you depending on your reaction or how wanted you are. So they essentially are the law in these systems, and they will exist in every system above 1.0 security. Sorry, 0.1 security. After 0.1, at 0 and lower, there's effectively no Telerath presence at all. So those are nullsec, to lift the term from Eve, but it makes sense. Negative, negsec sounds kind of ridiculous, so nullsec. In other words, no security. So what you would have to do now is you have to go find the Telerath station and essentially destroy it or somehow compromise it, and that would allow you to drop the security rating for that system by as much as 5 points. And it'll also affect the systems directly connected to that system by dropping their security ratings as well. And that will have the effect of, after a little bit of time has passed, of making the enemies in those areas more dangerous, more plentiful, and also making things more valuable in terms of the resources you can find there, like wreckages and mining. So the way you can use this tactically is you could, drop the security rating enough that there'd be enough enemy ships flying around that flotillas that are passing through to maybe attack you or one of your allies end up either getting severely damaged because of all the enemy on all the pirate activity, or have to choose a different route that takes longer, or maybe that's the only route they have to go to that particular place they're going to attack. So you could use that way to kind of create a beachhead or a bottleneck that you can go in and deal with. You could also use it to create havoc inside of an enemy empire as well, because once those systems drop their security ratings, their economic output will start to decrease, because the trading lanes and whatnot will be more apt to piracy, since there are more pirates around in those systems. So it's going to be a very interesting mechanic to see how people use and abuse. So as for how you would end up dropping it, actually though, the telegraph stations are not going to be listed on any contextual menu or maps or anything. They're going to be hidden within the system, and you'll have to figure out where they're at. And really the only way to do that is to follow or trail or track somehow the Teleroth patrols. And you'll have to have some sort of specialized equipment to do this, either cloaking technologies or actual tracking devices that you'll have to plant on the Teleroth patrol ships. And then they'll lead you to the Teleroth station, where you'll be able to either destroy the station or take it over through a boarding mission, or even hack it and essentially either temporarily disable it or even destroy it. And how you'll be able to accomplish those tasks depends on what equipment you have, your abilities, and things like that. For example, unless you know how to remote hack and have the equipment to do that, you may have to go onto the station itself and hack it directly. Or maybe you don't have the ability to do anything to the station, so you can't do anything with it for the moment. So there's going to be a lot of different ways you can deal with these stations, and it's really going to kind of apply to the game as a whole. My end goal for the game is to make it so that so open that the game's so open that you can really do pretty much anything and everything that you'd ever want to within the game. Of course, there would be ramifications for those actions, but you can still do them if you wanted to. So, let's see. Making sure we just covered everything here. So for the threat system, let's just go into that. So I think we covered all the topics for the security rating system. So for the threat system, it's pretty much simple kind of system. It is as it sounds. It's just a system that will allow you to determine how deadly an enemy ship is to you. And how this is determined is based on not on your cell or the enemy's level, but on the actual equipment and the ship statistics themselves. So the way this is determined is basically based on the amount of damage you're able to do to an enemy ship versus what they're able to do to you in the same amount of time. So if your damage per second is much higher than an enemy ship, then that ship's threat level will be low. However, if the enemy ship is able to do much more damage per second to you than you can to it, then its threat level will be high. Or rather, well, it'll be deadly, probably, depending on how much more damage it can do. So the threat levels in ascending order of threat are low, medium, high, extreme, and deadly. So low threat ships are ships that you could easily destroy. Medium threat ships are ships that are pretty much comparable to yours in terms of their damage output. High threat ships are ships that can do a little bit more damage than you can to them. Extreme are ships that can do probably maybe 1.5 times more damage to you than you can to them in the same amount of time. And then deadly ships are ships that can do more than 1.5 times your damage to you than you can to them over that time. So, the ship class and the ship armaments may or may not be an actual factor in their threat. So, you could be in a battleship, right? But there may be some sort of technology that only this particular group of pirates has, or maybe they developed specifically for them, that allows say a destroyer to almost either match or outmatch a battleship. That would be extremely rare for that to happen, but it could happen. It's potentiality. And if you don't have your ship equipped correctly, it could really more potentially happen then. So just having a big ship is not going to be a guarantee that you're not going to get your rear end handed to you by other ships. And these indicators can tell you, yeah, okay, we covered that. Other things that may apply to this are also the amount of damage that the ships can repair. So, if an enemy ship has a lot of armor repair modules or has some sort of regenerative armor, then their threat level is going to be higher than yours is, because you won't be able to do as much damage to them over that amount of time. So, let's say that for a minute, let's say that we cover 60 seconds worth of damage in this calculation for this. Let's say that in that amount of time you can do 20,000 damage to that ship, but that ship also has regenerative armor that heals maybe 10% of the maximum armor amount that it has per like 15-20 seconds or something. So it's going to be reducing that amount of damage that you do, and that's going to be factored into the total DPS you can do over a minute. And so that would cause it to maybe be, instead of maybe being a medium, it might be a high or even an extreme. So those will also play a part, what modules you have installed. That said, that does not mean that these ships will always be able to kill you, or you'll be able to kill them. Operator error, we'll call it, will always be a factor. Like if you miss, if you have a specific way of handling extreme and deadly ships that allows you to take them out most of the time, and you mess up your attack order based on to do that, then you'll probably get destroyed or at least severely damaged. So that's also stuff to take into account. It's not a be-all end-all measurement. It's just kind of a guide to tell you, you screw with these ships, you're probably going to get burned. So that's that block of mechanics there. There's a couple more things within that block to talk about, but they're related to other systems, so we'll talk about them then. The next group of systems we're going to be talking about will be the economy and things related to that. So that'll be for the next video or series of videos, and we'll go from there. So thanks for watching these. Hope you learned a couple things about the game, and hopefully it got you more interested in it. And if you haven't done so already, we'd appreciate it if you click on the subscribe button. It'll allow you to keep up to date with what we're doing with the game, and I will see you next time.